Hey there, welcome back to my shop. My name is Andrew Malacy. Today we are on part 2 of the shaker nightstand build. I'm really excited about this step. It's where we get to actually see the pieces come together. We're going to take our 2x4 sections that we broke down into rough lengths. I'm going to resaw them down the middle for most of them and get them somewhere thereabouts to about an inch, or we get them thereabouts to about 3/4 of an inch thick, and then glue up anything I have to, and do any other work I have to do to prepare the stock for the actual building process, like cutting mortises or things like that. The other thing is that I'm going to be cutting the legs. That's going to involve squaring up the pieces that I've previously rough cut, then cutting the taper in or planing down the legs to a taper even and square on all sides. As you remember, last time we got all these pieces cut to a rough length, and this means now that we have a whole bunch of small 2x4 sections that need to be taken down to their thickness. And right off the bat, I have to acknowledge that this is just really tedious and time consuming. If you would just buy 1x stock, this would save you so much time. In fact, the big disadvantage besides the time is the fact that you're going to have to clean it up, and you're not going to get actually 3/4 inch thick pieces. Here what I'm doing is I'm just taking my marking gauge. I've got it set for the half the thickness of the boards, and I'm just running it down the 2 long sides. That way whenever I go to saw it, I can have a really nice consistent guide and thickness for all the boards. Then I come back with the pencil and trace the line that's already there so I can see it a lot easier. Now, I'll be the first one to admit that I'm not the most accurate sawer or sawyer ever, and so what I like to do is just cut the corner on each side. So I'm going to flip the board over here, and then cut the other corner, and then just connect the 2 lines. And then, as I keep going, I like to establish a curve on the board, and then flip it, establish the curve, and then just finish my sawing down. As I'm sure you've already guessed, my saw was binding because the board was under a little bit of tension and was closing itself at the top, even at this short of a length. So I just inserted a little shim, which wedged it out a little bit, and I was back in business. All told, these shorter boards were about 2 to 3 minutes a piece to cut, and that did include me establishing the curve and whatnot. The longer boards were about 6 to 8 minutes each. You might be wondering what that piece is doing directly behind the piece that I'm cutting, and that's just there for whenever I break through and connect both cuts, my saw doesn't smack and gouge the bench top, and it's worked pretty well. For this clip here, I've actually posted another video of me sawing this entire board start to finish, and it's right in that 6 to 8 minute range like I said. I posted it separately. If you want to go find it and watch it, I've linked to it up above. After getting all the boards resawed down the middle, I went ahead and just took my number 5, and since the pieces are pretty short, I used that to joint the edges, and I took it down each edge down to the level where the round over from the 2x4 was gone. I'm going to be doing a video coming up about my sharpening setup. Nothing revolutionary, but in case you're curious, I'll be posting it. Your next step will be to plane away the saw marks and get that face nice and flat and ready to go. After you got the saw marks cleaned up and you got at least one side or one face of the board nice and flat, you're going to take your marking gauge and mark the thickness so that way both faces are in perfect parallel with each other. And you know, it's a really important step to go ahead and use that marking gauge to establish the thickness, because it gives you a line to work down to and you can keep checking it. And also then whenever, as you can see me feeling the side there, you can feel the line that you just cut with your marking gauge, and you'll see it once you're cutting through to it. And if you do use the same marking gauge to establish the thickness of all your pieces, you'll find at the end, if you've planed down to your lines, well, they're just gonna be right on the same level and you'll have saved yourself quite a bit of work. Productive day. Got all this milled up, dimensioned, well, to thickness, that is. Now I gotta cut it to its final length or thereabouts. But I did all of this, square 4 sides, and uniform thickness. Now I gotta glue. And I know I'm gonna get a lot of people wondering about this or commenting on this. I'm not going to use any clamps to do this glue up. And that's just because I made sure I took the time and took the care to plane all my edges nice and straight and square relative to the faces of each board. Whenever I stacked them on top of each other right there on my bench, as you can see before I even glued them, they sat perfectly. They were in the same plane. They weren't rocking or anything. And when I held them up to the light, there was no light showing through. If you've done all that work and you've got really solid edges that meet up really well, there's no need to just clamp the heck out of them. In fact, I tried something which is called a rub joint, and I know it's what they do for hide glue or other types of glue. I saw it on the Woodwright's shop, and I noticed here that it kind of did work. It tacked up a little bit. It got a little bit harder to move the more I rubbed it with a little bit of pressure. But let me just tell you, when I came back the next morning, the boards were fine. I would not have known that they hadn't been clamped if I just didn't know. We'll see how they end up holding up. Time will tell, of course. And if there's a failure or some sort of mistake, or if they break, I'll let you know. I'll be sure to be honest about that. Now I begin work on the legs, and that is simply just planing away the saw marks, getting everything nice and straight and flat and square, making sure that it's the same measurement on one end and on one face as is on the others. Mostly it's just a matter of taking your time. This is a number 8 I've got here, and so over the length of
20 something inches, it stays really true and makes quick work of jointing this and getting it nice and flat. On this particular piece, I hear there's a hollow in it because I'm getting either a skip in the shaving or a lighter sound in the middle, and so I'm waiting until I get an even sound all the way down and an even thickness shaving all the way down. And of course, once that happens, you come back and you're just always checking with the square to make sure you're on. At this point, the legs are ready to go. They're all flat and squared up, but one end needs to be taken to the shooting board to get that one end ready to go. It'll be the top of the leg. The bottom is still a little long and we're going to cut it off later. When I start to see that I'm getting more or less full length, full height shavings coming off the end, I know I'm ready to go, and then I just check it for square and move on to the next piece. And remember, we're only shooting one end of it because we still have to cut them the length once we actually make the taper on the legs. Now I'm going to bring my template up, and what you have to do is you have to trace your template on two sides, the top side and then the opposite side, or the side that's parallel to that, and then you tip that rotating at 90 degrees, and then you have your lines that you're working from. What I've done on my template is I marked the center line at the bottom of the leg where the taper is, and I marked the center line on the actual stock that I'm tracing the pattern onto, and then that way I can keep everything nice and uniform and my lines are in the same parallel plane. Originally I tried to cut away some of the waste and it just wasn't really helping me time-wise, so I just came back with my number 5 with a really heavy cut and made really quick work of it. Then once I got close, I backed off the iron and just eased up on it. And since I did a little nibble away a little bit at my 6-inch line, which is where the taper starts, 6 inches down from the top, I went ahead and remarked it because it's going to serve as a reference line for us just to make sure everything lines up well. And here we have the finished leg. There's the tapered end, much smaller at the bottom than the top. Looks great.
Well, that's it. It was a lot of work. I'm not gonna lie. I can't pretend like it was even quick. This would have just been so much faster had I just, from the very beginning, had the 1x4s or the 1x whatever. But like I said, I wanted to do this out of 2x4s. I've got a total of $7 of actual materials in it. But the work, I probably could have been much farther along now in just the time I've put into sawing, planing, and whatnot. The only thing I really would have done, like I've said before, is just bought the 2x4 for the legs. But since I'm going to be painting it, I could have easily just ripped the 1x's and glued them up, and that would have given me something just as quick. So it's a consideration. At this point now, we're going to be getting into the really good stuff like the joinery, and it's going to look like a table really soon. Well, I hope it was useful and enjoyable, and I'll see you around for the next one.